On this episode, we discuss the whys and whatnots of Thailand being named the 61st happiest country in the world.
So, if you've ever wondered why Thailand isn't happier or sadder than before, you'll be intrigued by this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 because the top of my head wasn't getting sunburned nearly enough in Canada, and I needed some extra solar love.
Well, you came to the right place, dude.
Yeah, sure did.
And I met Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 21 years ago, fell in love with using a random garbage bag as an umbrella during a torrential downpour because I lose all my umbrellas. So I never left.
Oh, it's funny you mentioned that. You know what I did the other day? I get tired of this too. I get tired of it raining, and then I grab an umbrella, and it's like one of those little 99 baht 7-Eleven ones. It's like super flimsy and barely covers my belly, you know? So I went on Lazada and I ordered like some big ass umbrellas. I ordered 4 of them for 200 baht each. I was like, the hell with it. I'm going to have some big, nice new umbrellas in my apartment. And they're awesome. They're great.
I did get a little satisfaction the other night. I was out with some buddies, and one of my friends brought an umbrella, and he said at the beginning of the evening, I guarantee I'm going to lose this umbrella tonight. You guys really got to help me. Like, at the end of the night, make sure I have my freaking umbrella.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it worked out that, like, he left it. We all forgot. And so my suffering is not so bad when I know others are suffering with me.
That's right. Life is suffering.
Okay, we want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, Emmanuel Spadaro, who supports us at the show shadow level. Stick around after we're done talking about Thailand's falling spot on the World Happiness Index to hear why Emmanuel's description of the average Thai kitchen nearly gave his mom a heart attack, and still might. We also want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons got a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, emails with behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world, and various other goodies. But best of all, patrons like Emmanuel also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about a guy who sent a 4-meter-long king cobra through the mail, my friend Jack, who decided he wanted to become a boxer here in Bangkok and won his first match, as well as the differences between the COVID entry requirements for Singapore and Thailand. Spoiler, one country is doing it right and one country is not. See if you can guess. To learn how to become a patron, click the support button at the top of our website.
Right. And as always, if you have something to say or a show idea or a joke or just want to say hi, head to bangkokpodcast.com and click the little microphone button on the bottom right to leave us a voicemail that we will play on the show, if it's nice.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, on this episode, we are going to dive into the 2022 World Happiness Report, which came out this month and listed Thailand as the 61st happiest country in the world.
61st?
Yeah, baby.
This is the land of smiles. Come on.
Well, stats don't lie, man. Now, 61 out of 146 countries measured sounds pretty good. Well, at least not terrible. There are countries that are worse. But when you consider that from 2012 to 2015, Thailand was ranked 33rd, well, things aren't looking so good. Now, one wonders, Ed, what happened around 2015? Oh, right. The coup of 2014.
What a coincidence.
And since then, Thailand has dropped 28 spots on the World Happiness Index.
Damn.
Yeah. So on this episode, we are going to discuss. Now, you can't see my screen, dear listeners, but it is, as I've got a big Excel chart open. I've got all kinds of PDFs open. I got browsers. My poor computer fan is whirring away. So it's a lot of information to deal with. And I will be the first to tell you that I am not a stats guy. So we may or may not have a really, really solid grasp on this, but I think we're going to do okay. But if you just forewarned, if you are a stats person or a statistician or a numbers person, you may or may not have several small aneurysms throughout the show. But I think we got a pretty good handle on this. Ed, what do you think?
Well, let me say this. This question, I absolutely love this question of trying to figure out how happy different countries are. And the reason I love it is that at least at my job, I pretend to be a social scientist. And a question like, which country is more happy than another? I think a lot of people would think, okay, that's just purely subjective. There's no way you could figure that out scientifically.
Right. It's like, how long is a piece of string?
Right. But as a social scientist, I think we can measure things like happiness that you might think of as subjective. So I like this endeavor. To be honest, I have not studied this report in detail, which I probably should. But I'll just say, I like this idea of taking something like happiness, which some people might say you can't measure, but then trying to measure it.
Right. Now, the report is like, there's a bunch of different appendices and all these things, but the main report is like 180 pages long. So yeah, it's not something we're going to
that's all? That's all?
we like to do our research when we can, but damn, man, this is a hobby, not a full-time job.
I support the endeavor.
But it's interesting you say that about how like it's this sort of thing that's considered unmeasurable and extremely subjective, and you can't really measure it. But, I was talking to a friend of mine who works in insurance one time, and he was talking about, he said, like, people always say you can't put a price on someone's life. And he's like, of course you can. Insurance companies do it every day,
Oh, yeah, sure. Life insurance valuations.
Yeah, it sounds a bit gauche and maybe, not something you'd bring up in polite company, but everything in life can be quantified and broken down to a fair degree.
Well, as a social scientist, I would have to say I agree. But it can be hard to figure out what to measure. It's like, for example, you want to measure happiness. Well, how the heck are you going to do that?
Right.
And in this particular thing, they looked at 6 different things. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the 6 things that they asked people to rate their happiness on. Now, what they did was they used data from the Gallup poll that measured thousands of people around the world over the past few years, and they measured them on something called the Cantrell Life Ladder, which is a question that people ask to measure their perception of happiness based around a certain idea. So,
sure.
A factor, I guess. So there's 6 of those factors. So the question is phrased like this. This is the question they asked people. Please imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom to 10 at the top. The top of the ladder represents the best possible life for you, and the bottom of the ladder represents the worst possible life for you. On which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel you stand at this time? So that was what they asked people, and they said how it relates to one of these 6 factors.
Okay, so I get it. So the basic idea is to take a general measurement first, which seems to approximate life satisfaction, right? So put yourself on this ladder. And so they have all this data in these different countries with answers to that question. And then they try to figure out what specific things cause that general response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, something like that. Now, we're getting a little bit into the weeds here, and, I don't want to get too far into that because I'm going to say something that'll derail the whole conversation. But let's get into these 6 things, and maybe you can fill in the blanks a little bit because you're much more smarter than I am when it comes to these things.
I don't know about that.
Well, you're not dumber. Let's put it that way. So the first one is the GDP per capita.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is a very interesting factor because it's only one of the factors they use to try to explain the happiness level.
Right.
But they're really assuming that a higher economic level is better. So I just want to point out that there is an assumption here because they're just the way they score it. If you live in a country with a higher GDP per capita, then they're assuming that you're happier.
Right. So the GDP per capita in Thailand is $7,189.04 US, which works out to about 240,982 baht.
Yeah. So, but do you understand my point? So they're just assuming that if there's a higher GDP per capita, then people are going to be happier. But okay, I just want to make that point. So they're trying to figure out what specific things explain happiness. So I guess it kind of makes sense. So maybe,
Yeah.
because you think economic level just has to have an impact on your happiness.
Yeah, and it is also doubly interesting because Thailand, as we've talked about on the show before, is one of the world's most unequal countries. So I'm really wondering what the answer would be if you went down to, like the outer reaches of Sukhumvit and said, hey, what's your thoughts on the GDP? Or some little hill tribe village in Chiang Rai.
You're right. Per capita is just an average. So the average could be high, but if you have high inequality, but I guess if you add all their variables together, maybe it kind of corrects for itself. But anyway, so Thailand is somewhere in the middle in GDP per capita then.
Yeah, I think so. So that was the first one. The second one they asked people to rate their happiness on was a healthy life expectancy.
Yeah, so I think this is also fairly simple. They're kind of assuming that the longer you live, the happier you'll be, or the happier you will say that you are, which I guess is true. So I think they're just looking at life expectancy. In which countries do people live longer?
Yeah.
That's it.
I guess there's some knock-on effects there too. Like if you know that your country has a high life expectancy, then you think, oh, well, that must mean we have a pretty good medical system. We must have a pretty good healthcare system. There's
You also have, you might feel like you have more freedom in your life to do this or do that. If you're like, I'm going to live to 85.
Right. And Thailand's life expectancy, FYI, is 77.15 years, which is pretty good. Pretty good.
Okay. So what's the next variable?
The next variable is social support, which they define as having someone to count on in times of trouble.
Right. I think I read a little bit about this. And basically, they ask people, how many people can you turn to? Like, if you're in an emergency, is there anyone you can turn to? Is there one person? Or, 2, 3, 4? So I like this.
Well, this is doubly interesting because like when Westerners think of social support, like coming from Canada, the socialist paradise, I think of social support as, if you unemployment insurance and free health care and
sure, absolutely.
Subsidized childcare and stuff like that. But we know that Thailand doesn't have those things. And if it does, they're not very good. So in Thailand, social support means something totally different. Now, of course, Thailand is a much more family-centric culture. So for a Thai person, social support might mean like, oh, I can always go back to the farm and move in with my cousins or folks or whatever, right?
With my aunt or whoever, yeah. No, agreed. Yeah, no, I so far I kind of like these variables. Like each of them individually, you can make arguments about why they would not represent happiness. But their goal, as I understand it, they're just trying to figure out what explains general satisfaction. So apparently they think social support, they think the data supports social support. I believe that. Yeah,
I'm down with that. And interestingly, this question and a few others were binary. So you could either do 0 or 1, and that's it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
This particular question was posed to them. If you were in trouble, do you have relatives or friends you can count on to help you whenever you need them or not?
I see. Okay. So it did not ask how many people could you contact. So it's just straight yes or no. But obviously then the more people in the society who feel like they have at least one person, that would indicate that the country's doing better.
Right. Yeah. So the next one is an interesting one. Freedom to make life choices.
Yeah. So I like this question because I do think that just being able to choose your own life is something that just gives you some life satisfaction. Just being able to marry who you want, being able to work where you want, being able to live where you want, being able to travel where you want. I like this as a variable.
It's pretty cool. The first thing I thought about when I was reading it, though, was one of the first times my eyes were opened to Thai culture when I first came here and talking to my students who I was teaching at the time, my high school students. And I would always say like, so what do you want to be? And they would say, oh, I want to be a dentist. And I was like, wow, so you're going to go to dental school? And they're like, no, I'm going to get my MBA because my parents want me to. And I was like, what? Like, it was just such a bizarre concept to me.
Sure.
So freedom to make life choices, I wonder if that impacts that. Probably not a lot, but something I think about.
No, I get it. I like this idea that whatever you can argue about. Sometimes in life, sometimes there's just too many choices. You go to buy shampoo and there's 20 choices. Like, I don't need that many. So
I sure don't need that many.
Choices can be paralyzing, but most people would agree that just having more options for your life is better.
Right. And the question here was, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with your freedom to choose what you do with your life?
Gotcha.
The next one, the fifth one, was generosity. And it was interesting how they measured this one. It says it's the residual of regressing national average of the responses to the question, have you donated money to charity in the past month?
Yeah, this is pretty brutal because I do give money to charity sometimes, but I have not given in the last month. So you could ask me that 10 times per year, and the answer is going to be no 9 times and yes 1 time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's a pretty high standard for generosity.
Yeah, it is. But again, I think this also has a pretty unique cultural aspect. I mean, in Canada, what would you'd have to the Salvation Army, giving to your church or something like that. But giving to quote unquote charity in Thailand, I mean, that could be people giving, money to the beggars on the street. I wonder if it includes releasing fish into the river or donating to the temple. It's a much more common element of daily life.
You're right. But I mean, I wonder, did Canada end up being happier in the end? I mean, so this is a good point, but I'm going to guess Canada was ranked higher than Thailand in the total index.
Well, let me see. Now, we can get into this a little bit later, but on this particular matrix, Thailand ranked 0.321. I don't know how they arrived at that number. I'm not sure what that number means, but on generosity, Thailand was ranked 0.321. Canada is ranked 0.217 on this measurement. So yeah, Canada is more generous according to this than Thailand. So that's interesting.
Like you said before, you might assume that Thailand has more social connections, but it's interesting that Canadian people are actually more generous.
I didn't know any of them. I never donate. The one time I donated to charity in Canada was when I had an old crappy car, and you got a tax receipt if you donated your car to the Kidney Foundation or something. So that's what I did.
You're like, all right, I guess I'll reluctantly give something.
Yeah, but first I wrapped it in duct tape. True story. The last measurement on this is an interesting one for Thailand, and it is the corruption perception.
Damn, that is a tough one for Thailand.
Yeah. So the question they asked here is corruption widespread throughout the government or not? And is corruption widespread within businesses or not?
I love the question. I think that it's a bit counterintuitive. They're trying to measure happiness, and they're asking people about corruption. I mean, that sounds like this political issue, but I agree with the question 100%. Corruption is just depressing. Just when you hear about, okay, this is how the world really works. And
right.
I think it does impact people's general happiness when you just find out like, oh man, the world is the shitty place that people say it is. I agree. It's depressing, man, isn't it?
It is. Now, check this out. Now, again, I don't know how they arrived at these particular numbers, but this is the ranking. On the corruption index, Canada was 0.368, which is better than Thailand. United States was 0.177, which is worse than Canada.
Okay.
Thailand was 0.026. So
which is worse.
Pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah. It's this word corruption in Thailand, I do have issues with. I think people use the word corruption sometimes too often. Like everyone calls everyone else corrupt. And because people believe Thailand is corrupt, then everyone's like, yeah, that must be true. But everyone is calling everyone corrupt. So sometimes I think the charge of corruption is almost worse than the corruption. But the simple truth is, just from my personal experience, from everything I've heard over 20 years, there's just more corrupt stuff here than back home. I mean, especially just on the low level, like we've talked about the 200 baht fine for this or the 200 baht bribe for that. Like that just doesn't exist back home.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I remember years ago I interviewed the Irish consul to Thailand, a guy named Gary Beastie. And he said he's been working in government and business for a long time. And he's like, every country is the same level of corrupt. And he said, at least here they do it with a smile on their face and the weather's nice. So
that's great. I like it.
Yeah.
this question, like I said, it's a great question, but it's so tricky to figure out what to value and what not to value. Just randomly in one of my classes, talking about happiness, we discussed the country of Bhutan. And
Right.
Bhutan is an interesting country because it's super Buddhist. It's a developing country, but the government is really taking control of economic development, and they have prioritized social issues over the economic. So they, in a way, they've kind of slowed down the growth, where they want to control more of the values of the culture, and so this has led to, Bhutan has this phrase they call gross domestic happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, because if you look at Bhutan in terms of GDP, it's low.
Right.
But at least the Bhutanese government wants to argue that, hey, our people are happy. So, I'm curious with this measurement if there is a bias against lesser developed countries.
It's interesting.
Maybe there are poor countries where they don't have Netflix and they don't have a new iPhone. But does that mean they're less happy?
No, I don't. I mean, according to this report, those things weren't really taken into consideration, right? Like
That's my point.
Well, maybe they should be.
Yeah. Well,
how many games do you have on your phone?
No. My point is that I'm curious if this index is biased against. The bottom line is people can be in economically lower rankings, but still have food and water and access to healthcare, but their GDP per capita is lower, and so they're just going to get a lower rank.
That's interesting. This is what someone said to me one time. We were walking down the street here, and we passed a dude on the sidewalk, and he was sitting there in his own filth. Hadn't had a shower in a year, and he was laughing his head off. And my friend, and the guy was walking and was like, he said, it's hard to argue with a dude who's that happy.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious because the 6 variables they have. Like I said, I don't really have a big argument with those variables, but I wonder if it is tilted against. I just know this from my classes. Even though I think happiness can be measured, that doesn't mean it's easy. It's like, how do you for example, your example of this guy who's in filth in the street but laughing his ass off, and then you have someone with who owns a house, who has good health care, and etc. Do we have to take their subjective opinions equally? Maybe the guy in the gutter is just being a fool.
Yeah, you're right. And then maybe that's not a fair comparison. I mean, obviously the guy's got bigger problems and that he's completely ignoring. But I don't know. I still think that our original point was right. Like, happiness is very subjective, and you can try to nail it down with numbers, and you can probably get pretty close. Maybe these guys are pretty close. But I think it's too personal. It's too subjective. And what makes one person happy might not make anyone else happy, even in the same community or the same household. So,
well, I mean, I don't know the reason for Thailand dropping in the rankings, but maybe it was the corruption number. I guess you and I would have to get into these numbers in more detail. But I'm curious what the specific variable was that shifted. I wonder if the perception of corruption went up just because the coup itself was illegal, and then the shenanigans with the Constitution was at least semi-corrupt.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the big takeaway here is that Thailand has dropped, almost 30 spots over the past 6 or 7 years. And there's a lot in there, right? I mean, there's coups, there's continuing political instability. There's that little pandemic we've had for the past 2 years, which probably affected a lot.
True that.
So again, like there's also, like I said, it's a very personal and subjective measurement, but there's also so many moving parts, from year to year. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's maybe you'll talk to someone here and say, no, this report's full of it. I'm way happier than this.
Well, Thailand is supposed to be the land of smiles. And I don't feel, obviously I can see some of the pain of COVID, but I don't know. I don't feel, just interacting with Thai people every day, I don't feel like like, oh, Thai people are less happy than they used to be? I mean, other than COVID, I mean, do you detect anything other than COVID?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's like this sort of like undercurrent of displeasure with the status quo now. A lot of the young people are angry and going overseas and things like this. So I do detect a sort of growing awareness of Thailand's place in the world and the ability of people to really compare it to other countries, which is made much easier by the internet and the access to information, which generations past never had. So yeah, man, I think it's things are changing fast, and I do understand why that number has dropped a little bit, even though personally, I'm just as happy here as I have ever been.
That's right. Yeah, I think I'm the same way. But I don't feel. I see the effects of COVID, and I see unhappiness in young people. So I guess that makes sense. It's just weird for me, just in my head, when I'm thinking of all the time I've been here. It's just, for me, I think it's just weird to think, oh wow, things have gotten worse. Like, for some reason in my head, I just want to automatically assume that over the last 20 years, things must have gotten better.
Yeah, right. I mean, but this is just another reason why we need to get out of our bubbles, all of us, and why we say Khao San is not Bangkok and Bangkok is not Thailand. There's a lot of things out there to experience outside of our little bubbles that we tend to settle nicely in when we're stuck at home for 2 years in a pandemic. So, I mean, I guess my takeaway from this is get out and explore, and maybe you'll find more of an affinity to understanding these numbers. Get out into Thailand a little bit.
Agreed.
Yeah. Anyway, that was our sort of wobbly discussion on this. I still don't understand how all these numbers fit together. And listeners, please be my guest. You can go through all 187 pages of this report. Please write a summary and let us know what you think. But we're still happy. We hope you're still happy. And Thailand still is a land of smiles, despite some maybe rough patches. But yeah, all the best to everyone involved, including us.
For sure.
All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with, no matter how we feel about it. Now, last time Ed asked me what I thought of the little plastic cards you put money on at the Thai food courts. So this week it's my turn.
Alrighty.
Now, Ed, back home, back in the motherland, when you go to the store and you get an ice cream sandwich, what I think about is like the little dark cookie wafers with vanilla ice cream or something in the middle, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Now, what I want to ask you about is what you think of the Thai ice cream sandwich, which is literally an ice cream sandwich. It's a hot dog bun with coconut ice cream in the middle, sometimes topped with sticky rice, fruit, and pine nuts. What do you think about this?
Can't do it, man. I guess I gotta go. I gotta go loathe, but in a way, it's even beyond loathe. It's just, as soon as I became aware of what the Thai idea of an ice cream sandwich was, I just rejected the concept. So it's like I don't even accept that they exist. It's just they're so ludicrous that they're kind of off the map. Like, that is not an ice cream sandwich. It's just absurd. It's like it came from Mars or something.
That's funny. I disagree 100%, but I get it, because a long time ago, years ago, I wrote a blog on my Greg to Differ page about this. And I said that this sandwich is a lot like Bangkok. It should not work, but it does. And
I don't accept the concept of that thing.
But when you think about it, like, I get it. I understand why you think like that. But when you think about it, it makes total sense, because it's hot. Ice cream melts, in 5 minutes here, and you've got that bread to sop up the ice cream. So that makes sense.
Bread and melting ice cream, that's just gross. Soggy, like fatty bread. That's not good, dude.
Well, it's not healthy, but it's not, it tastes fine. I'm just saying, man. I love them.
Old school foreign ice cream sandwiches, they make sense. It's like a thin, like dark, bread or whatever, crust or whatever, and then thick vanilla ice cream, and then more crust. I gotta go. I gotta go loathe. But to be honest, it's not even on the radar. It's just
it's not enough.
I'm not willing to accept that it's part of reality.
Love, loathe, live with, or not even think about.
Yeah, just off the reservation. But okay, so I'm going to go Loth. No,
No,
way.
I'm a love on this. I love them. I don't eat them a lot, but whenever I do, I really enjoy them.
Okay, I would try to keep that opinion down, dude. Just don't tell too many people about that. So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Emmanuel Spadaro for lending us his support at the show shoutout level. Greg, what did you find out about Emmanuel?
Well, Emmanuel is going to be moving to Bangkok pretty soon, which is pretty cool. Anytime we get one of our listeners who says, "I'm going to make the move," I feel like a little squeak of joy. It's like seeing your kid achieve something. You're like, yes, he's one of us now, you know. But I was chatting with Emmanuel on Discord, and he was talking about why he's leaving. You know, he's from Italy, so. He said, "We are constantly hammered from one side with messages like, live the moment, seize the day. And from the other side with, brace for failure, you will never find a job here." So being a young professional and confident in my skills, I felt the need of getting out of the scene. And Bangkok has that mix of modern style and old traditions that I haven't felt in other cities. It won't be like I'm on holiday, but I won't know until I try. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad he's taking that big step.
Well, I support him 1,000,000%. Once he's made that decision, you know, so like once someone's like, "I'm coming," I'm like, I got your back 1,000,000%.
Yeah, do it.
But the bottom line is when I hear people who are thinking about coming here, I'm like, wait a second. You need to know about this. You know what I mean?
Right.
But once someone commits to Bangkok, I got your back.
Yeah, so Emmanuel is doing the same thing that we did, and it worked out pretty well. So that's why we're on board with this.
That's right. Yeah. So he seems to be made his decision. So in that case, I'll support it 100%.
Right. So this is funny, though. He said, because he's from Italy. So he said, around a year ago, when I told my parents my intentions to move were indeed serious, the shock didn't hit my mom until she asked, "How are you going to cook?" I said, "No, Mom, I won't be cooking. The condos in Thailand have a toy kitchen compared with ours, and some don't even have stoves." I can still see her expressions changing. She ran all the stages of grief in the following 10 long seconds of silence, except that she is still struggling with the last stage of acceptance.
Oh, that's great. I love it. Emmanuel, I love your writing. I love how you express yourself, and I support you 1,000,000%. And you're absolutely right. In general, Thai condos have like shitty kind of baby kitchens.
Yeah. And just in case someone doesn't really understand how serious Italians take cooking, especially Italian food, let me play a little clip of a video on YouTube that we were discussing with on Discord. Me and Emmanuel and some other listeners were discussing. So take a listen to this. This is audio of a girl who pranks her Italian boyfriend by breaking some spaghetti in half before she puts it into the pot.
Is this enough for both of us? Is this enough for both of us?
No, a little bit more.
Okay, I'll wait.
Che cazzo? Sara, ma tu sei pazza!
What?
Sara, tu...
What?
Is enough? We don't... I have to eat this pasta so short.
What do you mean? I just...
This is not spaghetti, my love, come on.
It doesn't fit in the
Why don't you
pan.
understand me? No, you can't cut the pasta so...
But it just didn't fit in the pan.
I don't go in the pan, my love. No, you cut the pasta. You know that is illegal in Italy.
Dude, I can totally relate to this because I have Italian American friends, and I do like to actually break the spaghetti. And whatever, it's not like it's that important. I think it's to make it easier to eat. But you're right, that is not the traditional thing to do. That's not a way to make yourself popular in the Italian community.
No. So anyway, Emmanuel, you're going to have a great time. We're glad you're doing it. And looking forward to meeting you when you're over here. So thanks for your support.
For sure. All right, a final thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, baby. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube, send us a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter where I'm BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you back here next week.
Absolutely. Boom, baby.
I wonder why my voice is so. It feels like
It's more.
like my.
It's more sexy. It's it might not be as masculine, but it's more sexy.
No, it's more sexy. Like when I don't know. It's hard to explain. Just sometimes,
No, the raspiness.
like I'm singing jazz, but I can't make it go deep like I normally do without really straining my vocal cords. My voice is weird. I guess that's what happens when you got such a powerful tool at your disposal.
That's right.
Probably from yelling at my kid too much. Right.